3 days ago, a raid that went bad.
Tragedy tonight in Waco, Texas. At least 4 federal agents and a member of a cult group are dead.
Was it a miscalculation?
Our agents practiced for days on this, and they had bigger guns than we did.
Today, an agreement to surrender.
If I would do this, that all the people would stand here at the facility compound here, as y'all call it, will give ourselves over to the world.
Was it made in bad faith? Tonight, the standoff continues. Will it end in more bloodshed?
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
It is a convoluted story that seems to be in the process of ending, but already just about everything that could have gone wrong in this bizarre tale of a heavily armed religious cult, just about everything that could go wrong has. 4 agents of the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms were shot and killed on Sunday when they raided the cult's headquarters outside Waco, Texas. The number of cult members killed appears to be much higher than originally thought. This afternoon, it seemed that a deal had been reached between David Koresh, the leader of the cult, and law enforcement negotiators. ABC correspondent Tom Foreman is on scene. He picks the story up at that point.
By all accounts, the standoff was ending. The leader of the cult, David Koresh, wanted to give a sermon of sorts on national radio. Then he said he would surrender.
All the people would stand here at the facility compound here, as y'all call it, will give ourselves over to the world, give ourselves out to you. And this is what I promised, and this is what we're going to keep.
He gave the sermon but broke his covenant with police. And so federal, state, and local lawmen, many wearing flak jackets and helmets, stood at the ready should trouble erupt. Armored army vehicles were poised nearby. Everywhere was a strategic display of power, saying the bloody gun battle which erupted Sunday morning, leaving 4 federal agents and in all probability many more cult members dead, would not happen again.
Our agents practiced for days and days and days on this, and they had it planned for months. So I don't think there's really anything they did wrong. Like I said, they had bigger guns than we did.
But right from the beginning, some critics were asking, why did it happen in the first place? Why were the agents outgunned? Certainly they should have known what to expect. The day before the raid, the Waco Tribune-Herald began a 7-part series on the group's violent ways. It listed the weapons believed to be inside the compound, including a .50 caliber machine gun, Israeli assault rifles, AK-47s, AR-15s, even a starlight scope for night vision. And there was history. From the day David Koresh, who changed his name from Vernon Howell, joined up with the religious group known as the Davidian Branch, it proved to be an explosive pairing. A charismatic young Bible reader and his radically fundamentalist believers locked away in a rural compound waiting for the end of the world.
Well, you know what they think of me? They think I'm the Son of God. Do you believe he's the Son of God?
I hope he is.
Just last year, this Australian TV show about the group focused on its violent undercurrents. It cited, for instance, a power struggle between Koresh and another group member in 1987, a struggle which also erupted in gunfire. Koresh and 7 of his followers were charged with attempted murder. No one was convicted, but even then, former cult members were convinced authorities knew Koresh was very dangerous.
The authorities are very concerned about going in over there because it could be a massacre, because Vernon have got the people primed to a stage where they will defend him with their lives.
He has more of a Charles Manson mentality, you know, and I do see him as eventually becoming very violent if he's pushed in a corner.
Still, despite all those warnings, when agents waded into battle Sunday morning, many carried only handguns. They were quickly and decisively overcome by superior firepower. They came to seize the group's weapons and instead fought them. And there may have been other mistakes. Koresh frequently jogged on the country roads outside of the compound. Some of his followers say with just a little bit of patience, federal agents could have captured him any day they wanted to without incident. Frank Bowles, former hostage negotiator for the New York City Police Department, believes the feds simply failed to do their homework.
I think if You were outgunned. Where was your intelligence? Somewhere along the line, either your intelligence was faulty or you were fed incorrect information, and perhaps this was done purposefully. This could happen. And it's unfortunately, they paid a very heavy price for it in their own people.
Once the standoff began, other elements may have added momentum, making a bad situation worse. The media gave Koresh an open line to the public for his speech-making. Some worry the attention has encouraged him to continue the standoff.
Who is that man on the red horse? Doesn't Revelation talk about man on the red horse? How does it apply?
Some believe what happened today is the best example of that. Mr. Koresh was given what he wanted, a chance to speak to a radio audience, and when it was over with, he reneged on the deal. No one here is suggesting this is not a tragedy what happened here, but they believe it is a tragedy in the most classic sense. That is, it could have been prevented. There were human mistakes that were made that led up to what has happened here, and as you mentioned, Ted, it's just gotten worse and worse.
Tom, over the past couple of hours, we've been seeing and hearing reports that there's a regular caravan of vehicles that's been coming out of the compound. First of all, tell us about that, and secondly, do you have any idea who's inside those vehicles?
About a dozen vehicles came in earlier, and then some others went racing back out. This has been going on ever since this started. This was explained this evening by federal officials as simply a shift change, simply workers moving in and out. There's generally excitement whenever a lot of vehicles start moving in and out. Generally, it has wound up being a shift change. It is a measure of how little information is coming out from the federal authorities, however, that everybody gets excited and speculation seems to build every time something like that happens.
What's the relationship right now, Tom, between law enforcement and the media? The media was all over the location when the raid went down. Then yesterday you were all pushed about 2 miles away. What's the situation now?
The media has been pushed even further back from the situation to the point that an awful lot of people are frustrated, feeling like the story is absolutely in another state practically. They're not allowed to get close to the scene. I was in earlier today because I managed to hide out on the roof of a house near the compound and watch what happened much of the day. But when authorities found me there, they weren't too happy about it. And again, everybody's being pushed further and further back. That is probably not helping the situation for anyone, not just speaking from our own self-interest, but because it promotes so much speculation, and the more speculation there is about what's gone wrong and what is happening, just seems to antagonize both sides, both the media and the authorities here even more so. With things not going right to begin with, that does not help things.
Let me turn the question around on you, Tom, the last question for the moment, and that is, to what degree do you think the media contributed to the problems on Sunday by virtue of the fact that they were apparently right in the thick of things when the fighting began?
On Sunday, I think perhaps, as you well know, when video like that comes out, it can be somewhat inflammatory. It makes things seem worse than they are, although this was a very bad thing that happened. That may have added to the problem. Probably more so, the thing people are worried about is this constant contact with David Koresh. He was calling the first night a radio station in Dallas with what seemed to be quite a bit of frequency, talking about his ideas, sort of blaming the agents for starting it all, saying they started the shooting. Witnesses say that wasn't true at all. But that sort of access to the media and to the radio does seem to have concerned a lot of people. They feel like that allowed this to pick up a lot of momentum far beyond the fact that reporters were there when the event happened in the morning.
Tom Foreman, thank you. When we come back, we'll be joined by a former director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, by a reporter who's been covering the siege for the Houston Chronicle, and by a former hostage negotiator for the New York City Police.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Allstate.
Attention thieves! Flimsy locks on doors. Fencing back is so high nobody can see you. Easy access windows. Take your time.
It's the obvious but overlooked things that attract burglars to your house. To help make your home burglar-proof, see your Allstate agent. You're in good hands with Allstate.
Driving a Volvo usually inspires a certain sense of safety. Well, now we offer an additional sensation. The Volvo 850 GLT. The Volvo 850 GLT was voted the best new car in the $20,000 to $30,000 class. Who are we to disagree?
This is you and this is me.
Last year, thousands of innocent children were caught in the crossfire of violent crime. How much longer will you let this go on? Call this number now. We'll send you information on how you can protect your children from crime in your neighborhood. Together, we will take a bite out of crime. There are countries where bread is scarce, but this is America. Countries where electricity is rare, but this is America. Countries where infant mortality is a problem, but this is America. Here, it's a crisis. Every 13 minutes, another infant dies. But we can help prevent many of those deaths with prenatal care from programs like Healthy Start. Find out what you can do. Why? Because this is America.
Tomorrow, subs that measure the Arctic ice cap, robots removing nuclear waste, the hardware of war helping the planet on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Frank Bowles was the commanding officer of the New York Police hostage negotiating team. He successfully negotiated some 900 hostage incidents with the loss of only one life. He joins us from Newburgh, New York. Rex Davis was the director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms from 1970 to 1978. He joins us from our Washington Bureau. Kathy Fair is a reporter for the Houston Chronicle who's been covering the standoff in Waco. She joins us from a site 2 miles from the cult's compound. Kathy, let me begin by asking you the details of a story you wrote for this afternoon's paper in which you said that somewhere between 7 and 15 people are dead inside the compound?
That's right. That was confirmed by state officials and federal officials who were inside the compound here. The figure at 7 dead was based on interviews they conducted with children who'd been brought out from the compound, and the 15 figure was based on an estimate that federal agents made on the basis of people they thought they had killed and also on the basis of the number of bodies they had seen Sunday after the initial round of gunfire. Now,
I was going to ask you, I think you've already answered the question, but is it their impression that all of these people were killed during the raid on Sunday, or that some people may have died since then?
No, this was based on the initial round of gunfire that I believe lasted for about 45 minutes on Sunday.
Have they been talking to you at all about why it was that they didn't go in with the Bradleys and the armored personnel carriers on Sunday?
No, they haven't talked about that specifically. I believe they really thought they were going to be able to go in and it was going to be a kind of a textbook operation and that there would be no fatalities.
Frank Bowles, there is something very sad about hearing the spokeswoman for the ATF down there saying, well, we were just outgunned. Quite apart from the fact that one of the local newspapers down there on Saturday had information on the 50-millimeter machine gun in there, or the 50 caliber. Would you not think either that you're going to go in without any weapons at all and a white flag, or if you go in that you take everything you could possibly need?
Well, one of the problems that we have in a democracy, if law enforcement goes in and they look like they're going to be so overpowering, that the public relations aspect of it, and we start to look like a very much of an armed camp. So there's a delicate balance how it has to be done. But I think we must always take the worst case scenario. We must always look at the situation that if they say they have a gun, they have a gun. If they say they have a bomb, we have to believe they have a bomb. If they say they have a 50 caliber, we have to believe it until we prove otherwise.
This was a situation, and let me pose essentially the same question to you, Rex Davis. This was a situation where the local newspaper, the day before the raid went down, in effect published a list quoting former cult members as saying they had the 50 caliber, they had the AR-15s, they had the AK-47s. I mean, you couldn't possibly assume anything other than that these people were armed to the teeth. That, in fact, was why the raid was happening in the first place.
Yes, that's quite correct. I think certainly the .50 caliber machine gun would be the one that would cause you the most anxiety. But I certainly agree with Mr. Bowles that a law enforcement organization in this kind of a situation, who went in initially with Bradley carriers and APCs, could be very heavily criticized. I suspect that they felt that with 100 agents, even though that some of them were armed with revolvers, that with the element of overpowering manpower and hopefully the element of surprise, they thought they could gain access.
Well, you raise an interesting point now there on the question of the element of surprise. Clearly there was no surprise, and there's a lot of finger-pointing going on in this story, and I guess we'll find out over the course of the next few days who or what was really to blame. Some suggestions that the reporters were in there almost before the cops were.
Yes, well, I don't know the sequence in which they appeared, but my understanding is that the press were more or less accompanied the agents into the area. Also, I understand, of course, that the agents, once they were within close proximity of the premises, announced the fact they were federal agents and that they were there to serve arrest and search warrants.
Frank Bowles, if you knew that a group had the kind of arsenal that these people have, would it not also be reasonable to assume that they might have a police scanner?
Absolutely. That's one of the problems that we have. You know, the three keys that we have in any kind of situation, any tactical situation, is intelligence, communication, and discipline of firepower. Of course, getting as much intelligence is very, very important. Communicating that intelligence to each other is important, and we have to be mindful that communications are monitored. They're monitored by the media constantly, and we have to consider that if we're going after a group like this, that they would also be monitoring your frequencies, and so digital voice privacy, or at least some kind of codes, would be necessary.
We're going to take a break. We'll continue our discussion in just a moment.
I'm on my way to Atlanta, Georgia, to see what makes Ace the place.
It's got to be the values, John.
Like a heavy-duty Rubbermaid laundry basket for just $2.88, and this Ace 34-gallon wheel trash can for only $9.77.
Hey, Ace is America's place for better values.
Thank you. To all of you attracted by Buick's reputation for quality, but who think a new Buick is beyond your means, may I make the following suggestion? Go see the new Buick Skylark Custom. It is every bit a quality Buick. And as the most affordable Buick for $1993, it makes Buick quality more attractive than ever.
Can you afford the great fit and comfort of LensCrafters glasses? Of course you can, because our wide selection of comfortable frames starts at under $50. Now we have the prices you want and the perfect fit you need.
LensCrafters, the right fit at the right price in about an hour.
Once upon a time, there was this very bad little girl that no one loved.
And her name was Marty Saybrook.
Your standard poor little rich girl.
Her story's gone from bad to worse.
If you don't lay off the alcohol and start taking your lupus medication, you're going to be in serious trouble.
Trouble's what I'm in the mood for.
She yearned for happily ever after.
She wants to change, she just doesn't know how. I want to turn my life around.
But there's a twist to her tale.
I think Marty Saybrook's hiding something.
I can't wait to see how it turns out.
On One Life to Live.
TGIF is changing.
With a new look.
New laughs.
And two new funny families. First getting by.
I thought we'd sit down and have a nice civilized dinner.
I am all for civilized.
Can two families share one house?
Way to go, Mom.
Then, on Where I Live.
So, am I going out on my first date?
Yes. Meet Dougie and his family.
We want your family
To join our family.
For a very funny Friday.
Family Matters, step by step, getting by, and Where I Live. A new TGIF lineup Friday.
One of heavyweight boxing's greatest title fights is the main event Saturday on ABC Sports. It all begins with the flagship City Open. Then on ABC's Wide World of Sports, it's just been named the Fight of the Year, and experts agree it was boxing at its best. Now Quaker State Professional Boxing presents this unforgettable title fight. It's the network premiere of the Riddick Bowe Evander Holyfield Heavyweight War, plus the Santa Anita Handicap and the start of the Iditarod. It's all Saturday on ABC Sports.
For years, we fought a war our government kept secret. Primetime tracked down American servicemen who took part, but they aren't talking. Primetime uncovers the truth, Thursday.
And we're back with former New York City hostage negotiator Frank Bowles, the former head of the ATF Rex Davis, and Houston Chronicle reporter Kathy Fair. I think it's fair to say, Kathy, that we in the media are always pushing to get as much access as we possibly can. It's also fair to say that there are times when law enforcement loves it, loves having those cameras there, loves having reporters along. What happened this time? Were we pushing too hard? Did they want the publicity? Is it too early to tell yet what went wrong?
Well, I think it's too early to tell what went wrong inside the compound, and it may be too early to answer the question just what role the media may have played in the tragedy, whether the media bears any responsibility for the deaths of anyone. That's a question that has been asked at every press conference I've attended. It's a question that's been asked at every impromptu gathering between reporters and news sources in there. And the question has always been answered the same officially, and that is that they're not going to answer that question right now. But unofficially and off the record, I think many officers will tell you that they blame the media, particularly the local media, for the tragedy that occurred here. They think the fact that both the newspaper and the local television station, who were already at the compound, some of whom were reporters for, I believe, the TV station, allegedly were already hiding in the trees when federal agents arrived. And that was the first indication that many of them had that they had been set up, and that's a strong belief I think they have, that they have not shared publicly yet, is that they think they were set up.
Set up by whom?
My sources have told me they think they were set up by at least one reporter and perhaps one local law enforcement official.
Now, when they say set up, Kathy, what do they mean by set up in this instance?
That they were aware of the raid that had been planned by the federal agents and that they had tipped off the sect about it, and that is how they got permission to be on the grounds before the federal agents arrived.
Now, Rex Davis, let me come back to the point that both you and Frank Bowles made in the initial part of our conversation, and that is that in a democracy, it's very tough for law enforcement to go in with everything and appear to be too muscular in one of these raids. And yet, as we look now at the situation, 4 federal officers dead, somewhere between 7 and 15 of the cult members dead. After the fact, if people die, no one gives you points for going in, you know, and not looking too tough when you went in. Isn't it better with the 20/20 vision of hindsight now to say in situations like this, it's better to go in and be prepared for anything?
Well, yes, I think to some degree that's true, but I think here is a case where the officers felt that they had a well-planned raid, that they had sufficient manpower and so forth, so that obviously something went wrong. But with that hindsight, to say that it should have been done differently, I don't think that we're in a position to say that. If I can make a point about the press and law enforcement. Speaking as a former law enforcement director, the press can play an important role in situations like this because it's almost automatic that in sensitive situations that the people who are the subject of the searches and arrest warrants automatically claim misconduct on the part of the officers. For example, in this case, they claimed that the officers fired first. And I think the press, the presence of the press can establish what went on. If the officers acted improperly, they can report that. On the other hand, if there are claims made against the officers, they can refute those.
I think I agree with Rex on that, Ted, but I'd like to make one other comment. I think sometimes we in law enforcement tend to look upon jobs like this as being a barricade job. But we have to look at this and realize that you have kids in that place. And when you're going to do a law enforcement operation on a building like that, I think you have to look at it as a hostage job. This is what happened with the MOVE situation in Philadelphia. They went in and they felt that it was a barricade job, but when you have kids in there under 7 years old, these kids can't make their own decisions, so we in law enforcement are going to have to take a more difficult position in terms of it being harder for us to do, maybe taking longer, and maybe utilizing more manpower and more money. But when you get jobs like this, and we did it with the Nyack robbery, we set up 5 locations and used a lot of manpower and a lot of money, but we did the whole operation. We took the robbers from that killed the police officer and the guard up there in Nyack, the part of the Weather Underground and the BLA. We made it without one shot being fired.
Frank,
we took all 5 locations.
I'm sorry, we're down to about our last 45 seconds. The only question I want to ask is if Kathy's figures are correct and somewhere between 7 and 15 people died inside there, does it make any sense to say that law enforcement was trying to keep, sort of force down to a minimum when it initially went in there?
When they initially went in, but once they're fired upon, they have every right to try to save their lives.
Absolutely they do, but shouldn't they at that point have everything they need with them?
Yes, that should be there, including robots at this point in time, so they don't have to send people in there.
All right, Frank Bowles, Kathy Fair, Rex Davis, thank you all very much. I'll be back in a moment.